We're not going to win it tomorrow, but we are going to shift what's politically possible, and we are going to build the excitement and the energy that we need to win.
Avi Lewis campaigning in the nation's capital, one of 5 candidates vying for leadership of the federal NDP, with online voting now underway, and the winner to be announced March 29th. And Avi Lewis joins us now. Hello, Mr. Lewis. Welcome to Alberta Primetime.
Hi, Michael. It's great to be with you.
All right. You're campaigning on building a party for the 99%. What does that translate to where direction of the NDP is concerned?
You know, we obviously are coming off the worst result in our history in the last election. Our campaign has been focused on the cost of living crisis, what we call the everyday emergency of just trying to get by in an impossible economy. Canadians are facing sky-high grocery prices, the price of cell phone plans, rent and mortgages. It just keeps going up and up and up. And we actually think there's a lot of money in this country. 6 big banks made $70 billion last year. There's no shortage of money. Prime Minister has plans to spend hundreds of billions on the military in the next decade. There's a mood for big projects in Canada right now, with the world coming unraveled, war and threat of annexation from the United States. We need to stay focused on what everyday Canadians need to get by, and to actually create solutions as big as these crises that we face that would slash the cost of living for Canadians. So we've been proposing things like a public option for groceries and cell phone plans, and some new industries, clean manufacturing and other industries that would actually put people to work, as the economy is majorly challenged right now on all fronts.
Okay, on that point of money, you're the front runner in this race from the standpoint of fundraising, more than double that of Edmonton MP Heather McPherson. What is it about your platform you feel that it's resonating with party members, creating a degree of momentum, certainly?
Well, we've been seeing a lot of people come out since the fall, and the crowds are growing, and the sense of momentum is growing. And I think it is like that we're experimenting in our campaign and just straight talk. Canadians are kind of tired of politicians crafting the right message to kind of not offend anybody but not say anything at the same time. So we've been really forthright about the solutions that we're proposing to the crises we face, and speaking to the fact that Canadians are fearful these days. I mean, the war that's been unleashed by the United States and Israel in the Middle East is terrifying. The price of oil is spiking. And as we've seen, and Albertans know better than anyone, the big 5 oil companies will make a lot of money in the next couple of years, but also that'll drive inflation. We know from the great economist Jim Stanford that almost half of the last inflation crisis a few years ago was driven by sky-high oil prices. That could be worse this time. We need a government that actually protects Canadians. That's why we're calling for a public option for groceries. That's why we're calling for major investments to not just like fix our broken healthcare system, but to extend it. Eyes, teeth, mental health, medicine, all part of your health, should be part of our healthcare system. We need a Canadian shield made of Canadian steel, which we can't sell to the United States because of tariffs, to protect our economy from the United States and restore our economic independence. So that looks like a 21st century grid for electricity, renewable energy across this country, which, you know, nobody ever blew up a refinery full of sunlight. There are different ways to build into the future of a Canadian economy that cuts people's household bills, that slashes our emissions and deals with the climate crisis and gets us off this boom and bust roller coaster and onto a solid plane of economic independence for Canada.
From that federal political dynamic right now, the latest from pollster Nick Nanos points to the Liberals having the biggest lead they've had in months, 11 points over the Conservatives, but that 11%, that's also the degree of support the NDP has in total. What does polling like that reflect about where the NDP is at the moment from your standpoint?
Well, certainly in the last election, we lost votes to the Conservatives and we lost votes to the Liberals. And that's why we've been laser focused on the cost of living emergency. I mean, you know, we pay mobile data rates that are in some cases 1,000 times what people in Finland pay. Right? Because we have 3 telecommunications giants, Bell, Rogers, and TELUS. Worst customer service anywhere. I don't blame the service representatives, but the companies are squeezing us for more and more money, and they're squeezing their employees for longer and longer wait times. You could watch your life drain out while you wait on hold to just change something in your cell phone plan. We actually need solutions that will win us back Conservative voters and Liberal voters, and something like a public option for cell phones. In Saskatchewan, they still have SaskTel. They have lower cell phone plans than anywhere else. In fact, a few years ago, Rogers, TELUS, and Bell had to lower their prices by 40% in Saskatchewan, around 40%, just to compete with a public option for an essential service in the 21st century. We need that kind of thing federally. We've got the money and the know-how to do it, but we have to put the everyday Canadians' bills first instead of big projects that will increase profits for a handful of corporations and won't trickle down to consumers. We really need the same fix with the housing crisis. We got to fix these problems directly. We believe the federal government ought to be doing that. And that's going to bring back voters from both federal Liberals and Conservatives. At least that's the plan.
All right, let me ask you this. How does Alberta fit into your frame of reference for a rejuvenated NDP? We're a province right now embroiled in a whole lot of discussion and debate around the prospect of a referendum on separation.
Yeah, I mean, Alberta is central to Canada's future in so many ways. And I think the Premier has been extremely irresponsible, pretending not to, but effectively stoking this separation movement, which I think is MAGA aligned and potentially U.S. funded. I think it's very unhealthy and divisive. I've got a lot of time for Naheed Nenshi and have spoken with him in the course of this campaign saying, thank you for standing up against the use of the notwithstanding clause against workers, against trans kids. I think an Alberta NDP government would be a wonderful thing. I think it would deal with this inflated but still serious threat from the separatist movement. And I think to hold Canada together, we need to just stop focusing on all of this noise and put Canadians' daily lives back under the microscope and say, when people are struggling to pay their bills amid all this wealth being generated in a province like Alberta, we need new plans to make people's lives better. I was standing in a field in Edmonton with a fellow named Mark Doran just a couple of weeks ago beside a pump jack that was at the end of its life, that had been downloaded to a little company, a garbage company called MAGA, that it collects all of these wells at the end of their lives, and the responsibility for cleaning up hundreds of thousands of wells at the end of their lives from the conventional oil industry in Alberta. If we made polluters pay, which something like 90% of Albertans support, would create decades of good jobs for the very same oil and gas workers that have been laid off from the industry, 40,000 of them since the last boom, where the oil and gas industry has figured out how to make a barrel of oil with 45% fewer workers. We need a future for oil and gas workers in Alberta, like we need a future for workers all over this country in new industries and new projects like a reclamation boom, where we actually make those companies, which have made hundreds of billions of dollars from our common resources, pay their fair share to clean up the most beautiful province in this country. And that's the kind of new idea that we want to bring to Canadians. And Alberta is right in the center of every major issue facing this country.
All right, we're out of time. We'll have to leave it there. Appreciate your time this evening, Mr. Lewis. Thank you.
Great talking to you. Thank you.
That's federal NDP leadership candidate Avi Lewis.